about your training. Like you're cognizant about being on a program and trusting the process, like you said. So hopefully that's something like viewers can take away, being patient. Because I'm trying to think, you said you had some knee issues. Have you dealt with like injuries along the way, or have those been kind of tamed?
Yeah, so I've been pretty fortunate. I had one significant injury, which was when I had an umbilical hernia
I
during
remember that.
senior year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was bad. And that one had a lengthy mental recovery because it was always kind of one of those back of your mind things like, oh, because I did my research, I like to read and stuff, so I'm like, oh, the reoccurrence rate is, well, whatever. So you're always kind of nervous. So I kind of held myself back for a long time in terms of really getting after it. And I think during but I've been pretty fortunate in that regard. Other than that, I had one bad back injury, or not even too bad. I hurt my spinal erector, one of them pretty good, and that made it pretty tough to get around for a while. But other than that, I've been pretty fortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that umbilical hernia from lifting? Or was it from
Uh,
something else and then you couldn't lift because of it? Do you remember?
It was kind of undetermined because it wasn't protruding at all, like typical of one sustained during lifting. So the doctor's best guess was that it may have been an artifact of not having one as a child because I never had. Most children will have an umbilical hernia very young and it'll
Hmm.
heal up and it's not a problem. But I never had one, so they think possibly that weak spot never did tear and then heal like is typical of babies. So it was just kind of a weak area, and it may have happened from coughing or who knows what. So hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like that kind of speaks volumes just hearing your injury history of the calculated approach. Even though, and I talk about this sometimes when I'm trying to either usually it's convince someone to stay on a program or convince
Mm,
someone to um like push themselves more because usually it's like one end or the other. I don't know why. Like
mm.
people are either crazy aggressive or they're crazy conservative in the gym, and it's like about finding that middle ground. And I think someone like you or I is we're good testaments to pushing enough but trusting programs, because if you just go in and you max out every time you hop in the gym or you go till failure
Yeah.
constantly, like those injuries are gonna stack up. And then before you know it, you're gonna be stuck out of the sport because you're just beat.
Yeah, I agree. And a big one with like the program jumping that we've talked about a couple times is that when I was program jumping a lot, and this stuff has even, happened recently to me in the off season, you'll find yourself taking a look at lots of different things, and then you're like, whoa, stop. Um, when you program hop all the time, a lot of people I find myself doing or other people, they won't deload forever because you're doing the
Mm.
first, almost the first block or close to the first block of every program in the world. And it's always, well, I'll wait till Monday and I'll jump into the next one, or I'll wait till, I'll jump into the next one. And you never deload. And that's just crazy because that is so important to, be strategic with your waves and your blocks to make sure that you do rest up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That if you're familiar, which I'm sure you are, with Mike Tushir of
Hmm?
RTS, he likes to use the term pivot, or like a pivot block, where it's a couple weeks to just get like reacclimated to something new before you just jump into it. And I like that terminology, even though like I think in old bro speak, what he's saying is deload, right? But he's
Yeah,
using the word
yeah.
pivot,
Mm,
which I like that word because it kind of implies, hey, you're going in this direction. You need to like take a couple weeks to turn to the next direction rather than like take a step back or something like that. But you're
Mm.
100% right. Um, that's one of the detriments from like hopping programs so much.
Yeah, I agree. And um, yeah, it's just important to deload, and it's also just important to take care of yourself. And like you said, it doesn't deload isn't synonymous with take a step back or take it easy or lift light. A lot of times you're talking, you're knocking a couple percentages off of it, in terms of weight, but
Mhm.
it's usually still pretty hefty. It's just that you're reducing volume or you're reducing number of sets oftentimes for me. And that makes a huge difference for me. And I've used the Juggernaut AI system a good bit in my
Mhm.
training in the past, and they do bridge blocks, which are similar to these pivot blocks, where you'll have kind of an introductory block going in, and yeah, it's great. And a lot of times you think, oh, I only have two sets of whatever for, let's say, competition bench press, and you're like, well, maybe I should just do a couple more. I usually do three working sets or four working sets, but no, like the work will come. It's usually an accumulation over the course of your training cycle. So if you are really in there training hard and the frequencies where it needs to be, it's going to rack up over time.
Yeah, I always think to myself like when I'm tempted, because I've been fortunate to where I talked about the like way too conservative and the way too aggressive lifter. I'm
Mm.
closer to the too conservative lifter. So I never have these thoughts of like hopping off my program, which, I've been fortunate to where I've been with the same coach for 7 years at this point. And like, I just know what he puts on the paper, that's what I'm going to do. But
Nope.
the closest thing that I come to like going off program is uh, I use mostly percentage based training with him. And sometimes the number will be between two intervals. So like it'll be
Yeah.
like 617. And that little demon on my shoulder is like, that's close enough to round to 620. But every time I listen to that demon, what happens is because it progresses the next week, you have like that pressure to keep rounding up. And like
Mm,
you said, that fatigue builds on itself where it's like, why not just, you know, take it down to 615 or whatever the number is and
mm.
like just hit it faster, you know? And
Yeah.
that's going to roll more confidence into the next week.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Um, and like you said, it's almost like counterintuitive because so if you look back on week one of the block, you're like, I'm splitting hairs over 615 versus 620, but you're like, okay, at the end of the block, week, whatever it is for your style of training, okay, well, I'm going to be hitting the single with 650 or whatever. It's like, well, maybe I should just
Right.
do 615 in due time. I am headed that direction, and beyond.
Yeah.
So let it come.
Yeah, and I think that's like to give another kind of example, I've this one's been sitting with me where uh I recently was getting into my training for North Americans, which is in August. So I have 12 weeks and I had like a pretty bad leg infection to where I was out of the gym for a couple weeks and um I have snatch grip RDLs that I do on day 1 of my program. Well, the first week, I think it was a 4x10 at either 365 or 385 and I posted it up on YouTube or wherever, and someone commented and was like, "You may as well like not have done anything. It was too easy." Was kind of their point,
Yeah.
but that's that short term mindset because sure, I could have like thrown on 50 more pounds and done like 415 for 10 or something like that. But what does that do to my fatigue? That, like, where do I go from there? I'm 16 weeks out. I can
Exactly.
only progress for so much longer. And instead of that, I started light, which they were right. Like, they were easy sets. But
Mhm.
at this point, 5 weeks later, we're up to like 520 for eights. So we've progressed
Mhm.
farther than had we just like jumped into some number. And people, I think that comes with like social media. I don't know. It's the short term, like I want it now mindset.
Yeah, and like 2 points on that is one, like you said, you're going beyond what you could have done that week. So this person who is giving you grief would probably have granted their, good graces to a four, like you said, 415, 435. They've been like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. But now you're up to 520. So it's
Right.
like, give me my time. Like I will do something that pleases you. Not that it even matters, you know that, but and
Right.
then also with the instant gratification, this is just the wrong sport. Like I thought this was the right sport for
Yeah.
all kinds of instant gratification at first,
Uh-huh.
but fast forward 7 years, like we talk about, and I've only ever even gotten out there 4 times. I've achieved not as much as I thought I would, but it was all worth it. I love it, and I'm going to keep doing it. But it is not instant gratification. It is hard work and knowing that you're headed somewhere where you want to be.
Yeah. And I mean, you you got to give yourself more credit. You've been training for we'll call it 7 years at this point, and
Yeah.
four competitions is much more than 99%